Thank you, guys. We'll just wait until we get a little bit more audience. Kind of give it some time to cook in there. Give us some time to cook.
So is it going live on Facebook and Instagram at the same time? Or is it just Facebook?
It's just on Facebook and YouTube.
Oh,
actually.
YouTube.
Yes. I'll upload them later onto Instagram when we have a little bit more time.
Okay.
But eventually, yes, they will make their way over there. All right. I think we got a couple.
Did Facebook get rid of watch parties? Because I've been trying to like share stuff that I've been on, and I haven't seen the watch party option.
You know what? It's gotten more difficult to see to start a watch party. I've noticed myself too, Joe. I've noticed it's gotten more difficult for whatever reason. It just doesn't appear the option like it used to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'll share.
Please do. Go right ahead. Let's start this off.
Awesome. Hello, welcome audience, and also welcome artists. My name is Joe Maldonado. I am just a common man with little artistic talent, but I appreciate good art, visual and otherwise. I'll be moderating this discussion today. So first, to start off, I am going to go around the room and have everybody introduce themselves. If you can give me your name, what medium you work with, and what city that you are based out of. And why don't we go ahead and start with Araceli?
Okay. My name is Araceli Esparza, and my medium is a pen and paper. So I'm a poet, I'm a writer, I do creative writing, I write for children as well, I write picture books, poetry. I do a lot of copying, a lot of copywriting for Facebook and other platforms, and I create content. I dabble a little bit on design, but more my heart is poetry. Yeah, I've been doing that for since high school. I don't know. One day, I think I was reading. We read "Down These Mean Streets" by I forget. Yeah. Okay, yes,
Piri Thomas,
right? Who?
Yeah, Piri Thomas.
Yes, by Piri Thomas. That was like the
favorite books.
Yes, that was my first Latinx book that I had ever read. And I read it like my senior year, Down These Mean Streets. And there is so much poetics in his writing and his prose. It just like, I don't know, it lit a fire in me.
I love it. So next I will go to Madison Poet Laureate, Angela Trudell Vasquez.
Hello, I'm Angie Trudell Vasquez, and I am the Madison Poet Laureate. Let's see. I have lived in many places. So I'm from Iowa, lived in Seattle, lived in Milwaukee, and now I'm here where my husband's from. And we live on the Far East Side. My main medium has always been writing. And I started writing at the age of 7, and I was inspired by a picture book, which I'm going to show right now.
What? You still have it?
This is why I'm a poet. This book right here, Frederick the Mouse. And I really keep thinking I need to do a reading of that for children. I just taped some videos this week, poetry videos for elementary kids. And I really see the power in writing. So I work with all ages. I say I can work from 4-year-olds to 80-year-olds. And I really believe that. I did a 2-hour poetry workshop yesterday, poetry for the people, like resilience in a pandemic and all this stuff. So my main love is poetry. I am writing a memoir right now and taking a writing class, which has been really fun through a colleague of mine. But I also write short stories, sci-fi, short fiction, and essays. Op-eds I used to do, but I've earned 2 push cards, one for a poem and one for an essay. And I'm really exploring the longer form right now, because poetry is about distillation, right? And you can't do that necessarily in a memoir. So that's what I'm working on. I'm an editor. I have my own publishing company, Art Night Books. but I've edited the Yellow Medicine Review with my friend Melissa Kingbird. That's a different version, but that's from the same publisher, Yellow Medicine Review. And Margaret Roskin and I, the Wisconsin Poet Laureate, are going to release a book in October, which is Poet Laureates Past and Present across the state of Wisconsin. It's Wisconsin in Poems, called Through This Door. So that will be coming out before November. So I wear a lot of hats. Mainly
Love it.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I love it. I heard sci-fi in there. Are you an Octavia Butler fan?
Oh, you bet. I mean, I was reading sci-fi as a child in the library. I have my favorite sci-fi books as children. They're by H.M. Hoover, Children of Morrow. And I read those and read those and read those. And I grew up on Twilight Zone and Star Trek. And yeah, you know, I love science. I love history. I love math. These things come in my work. But for me, sci-fi is great. And Octavia Butler, of course. Of course I read her. She died too soon. We should have got a lot more out of her. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. I love it. Thank you. Let's go on to our next panelist, Maria Amalia Wood.
Hi. Yes, my name is Maria Amalia. I was born and raised in Honduras. I lived there until I was 10, and then we came to Madison, Wisconsin for 4 years because my dad getting his PhD at the University of Wisconsin. When he finished, we returned to Honduras, and I did most of my high school there. And I always dreamed of coming back to the United States to do college here. And so I did my last year of high school in Mississippi. And then, and I did that kind of as a jumping point to be able to visit colleges and apply from within the United States. And then I ended up going to Judson University, where I got my bachelor's in art with a minor in visual communications. Met my husband there, and then we moved to Madison after about 3 years of working in a company. I was an artist, but I was actually working in business for like as a production manager for like 3 years, and I was traveling back and forth from, at the time, Elgin, Illinois to Nicaragua, and I would spend several months in Nicaragua just training many ladies on jewelry production, which led me to designing beaded products. And then I really got into just loving craft. And so I ended up applying to work at Serve International, which is a fair trade organization here in Madison. And I worked with them for about 4 years, and I absolutely loved my experience there. I traveled to many countries in Latin America, working with producer groups from different backgrounds. They were working in jewelry and textiles, with ceramics, etc., all sorts of crafts, and loved it. But what I loved the most was the textiles. And I also got to work with groups in India and Nepal, and just love the textiles. And so I ended up getting a textile certificate from the University of Wisconsin. And while I was there, found out about their MFA program in fiber arts and textile design. It's called Design Studies. And so decided to quit my job, which I loved, and decided to get my MFA. It's a 3-year program, wonderful program. And that's where I had never called myself an artist. Till that point, I would say I was a product developer before that, and a designer, but not an artist. And it wasn't until I started finding my own voice within that program that I started being more confident in calling myself an artist. And that's where I fell in love with just the fiber arts, and more specifically paper. So I work a lot with handmade paper. I'm a paper maker, and most of my work that I will talk about today has been done with handmade paper. And so now I call myself an artist. That's what I do most of the time. I'm an art educator. I teach K through 8th grade art at Lighthouse Christian School. And I'm also a teaching artist, so I do workshops with the community, and I just got done doing virtual classes, so you can take paper making through me virtually. But that's what I do. But I'm a mother, so I would identify myself as a mother artist. My life, my domestic life feeds my work. And so we're intertwined, we're one. And so I often say, when I talk about my work, I often bring in the fact that I'm also a mother, because it does inform my work. Mm-hmm.
I love it. Renaissance, like you do everything. Awesome. Well, so some of you touched on this, but to get the conversation going, want to ask if you can identify sort of maybe that moment that you really fell in love with art, and talk a little bit about your relationship with art. Anybody can grab it.
Well, I'll go ahead and go. I too resisted the artist, right? That label. And it's the one I totally say now. I'm an artist. I'm a writer, but I'm an artist, because I see poetry as a visual art form. And I just watched a special last night on Nova, because that's how I roll on a Saturday night, on paper making, the history of paper making, and it was fascinating. So I want to hear more about that. But I think I was a writer, and I didn't go back for my MFA until my late 40s. And I went to the Institute of American Indian Arts. And prior to that, I got my undergrad, and I studied, and I took writing classes here and there with the Woodland Pattern Book Center, or as opportunities came about. But it was when I went to New Mexico, and I became like really into indigenous poetics, and I studied with world-class writers who identified as indigenous or Native American, and here I am coming in from the Midwest, never been in the Southwest, and I felt at home, and I fell in love with the area, and I really turned the dial, I would say, on my writing. Everything prior to that was organic. I went to get my undergrad and studied, as a much younger person in my 20s. And then to come back, and then all of a sudden I need to learn theory, and I need to catch up on the terms, because the class I was in was with younger folks and folks around my age as well. But there was a huge, vast pool of knowledge that I didn't have yet. So I really had to buckle down. And I'm working full time, and then I went to part time, and we moved to Madison. So I'm driving back and forth, and writing in the morning and writing in the evening. But I've been publishing since I was in my 20s, right? So it's a long time coming. But I think I knew of the Poet Laureateship, and I know that from seeing people in it, in the roles. I've always been a poet groupie. If there's a writing summit, I'm there. I have met some of the most wonderful writers in the community over the years, but it was getting my MFA and watching other people do this literary ambassadorship, right? Because we go out there and you promote poetry, and you're a poet for the people. And I've been calling myself an artist for I don't know how long now. I think I lost count, because at some point I embraced it. I really embraced it. And now I see poetry as a visual art form. I spent 2 hours teaching people to learn. I see it as craft. I mean, it really is craft. Inspiration is easy. The inspiration is easy. It is like making it ready for public viewing. So I could talk more about that. I want to hear other folks, but I embrace the artist. And I think I went back later because I needed to have a job, and I needed to pay the bills. And, it's me and my husband. I wanted to have nice things. I wanted to go.
I can do exactly the same.
Oh, okay.
Poetry doesn't pay the bills necessarily. So.
¿Que ellos me van a oír a mí?
So that's about it.
Awesome. Araceli, do you want to hop in on that question? Or should I pass it off to Maria? Let's go with Maria next.
Okay. It's when somebody asked me when I first fell in love with art, I always had this memory in my mind when I was very young. I cannot tell you how young, but
Oh.
I got sick a lot when I was little, you know, and I think little kids always are catching colds and flu. I always remember being in bed a lot, and back in the days we didn't have iPads, and the TVs that we did have,
I know.
they had shows that were just at specific times in Honduras, and so the things that I would do to entertain myself, my mom would give me a ream of copy paper with some colored pencils and crayons, and she would just say, just draw. And so that's how I just fell in love with color. I fell in love with the color experience, and I would draw fruit. Lots of fruit, and then I just started drawing stories, and until this day, stories. I'm really interested in stories and narratives, and how I can use my artwork to show those stories abstractly through color and through texture. And so, yeah, my road wasn't necessarily direct. Like, I wasn't like, "Ooh, I'm going to be an artist." I never ever said that. I wanted to be a lot of things before I said that. In fact, in Honduras, if you have the ability, if you have the blessing to get an education out of the country, to go to the United States and get an education, the last thing you're going to do is study art, because that doesn't give you money. That doesn't make any money. And so you want to study business administration, or become a lawyer, or become a doctor, or etc. So I was always interested in anything creative. And so my teachers at the time were like, "Why don't you do architecture? You know, because that sounds more professional." And so that's the route that I took. In fact, when I came to the United States, I came to study architecture. And once I was here, I was gone. My parents weren't there, and the Honduran culture wasn't there to put the pressure on me. So I did whatever I wanted to do, and I decided to do art. And since I started on that path, it's the path that has been consistent for me in one way or another. I mean, it's shifted in various forms, but design and art and creativity has continued to be a part of my journey since I was little.
Awesome. Araceli, do you wanna chime in?
So I just want to excuse myself for not hitting mute earlier. We're kind of dealing with some technical stuff. We're just trying out some different things here. You should see it. Next to me, I have this huge screen, and Lisette, our team from Wisconsin Mujer, is helping us with some tech stuff, which is amazing. It helps me relax too in this, so I can really be here with you guys. And I think that's what art for me has been such the grounding effect of my life, is that it's connected me with so many different people and just so many different things, and things that I didn't imagine like 10 years ago are becoming a reality now. And through that, I've been able to expand my platform, Wisconsin Mujer, to do these amazing lives, like do these series. I mean, and like really work creatively on and getting community around to care for our arts here in Madison, Wisconsin, to care for like community art, if that makes sense. Like, I know we've been talking a little bit about art degrees and so forth, but before we go into all that, and before we went to that, I think there was there's that space, right, where we doubt the words and we doubt the work and we doubt all of that. Sometimes because, like you were saying, Maria, like, and where we're from, like this option is like a luxury. It's considered a luxury, and it is not seen as validated labor. And I'll tell you, we were joking yesterday in one of the talkbacks, whose house is clean? Like, whose artist house is clean? Like, none of our houses are clean. We got everywhere. And our kids see that. I mean, I'm looking at Joe's back behind him. I'm like, what is that? This is gorgeous. Whatever you have, that portrait behind you is just amazing.
It's from the store. It's like mass produced. I get so many compliments on it, so I just want to make sure I'm not stunting and and lying on myself.
Right. No, I get it. But that's the thing is like we are art. Our lives are artistic as well. Just the way we go about doing things. I never went out thinking I was going to be an artist. I still am hesitant on using that word as so much as like a connector and an organizer. Those were my first roles into this, and I see arts as, for me at least, it was like therapeutic, as a way to like give voice to all of the BS and just all of the contradictions, hypocrisies, just all of those things that just brought so much oppression to my family and to myself. And so that's how I saw it first, before I thought about going into, getting my degree, honestly, was a way of getting out of being homeless. Like not kidding on that one. I had my undergrad, and that was like a struggle and a half. I had my son, my first kid, as a single parent, like during my undergrad, and then finishing that up. And then like some years later, I had found myself like without anything, including hope. And the one thing like I came across was like this thing on my Google, like back in the day, like Google would like sign off on commercials on your email. I don't know if you remember that. It'd be these little banners. And one said something about like going to get an MFA, a low residency, it said. And I was like, what's that? That means I don't have to really be there. Okay. I'm like, what does that mean? And then writing for children. Well, I had been really getting into graphic novels. And that had been my thing. I've always loved graphic novels. The Hernandez brothers puts out this Love and Rockets. Now, if y'all have never read Love and Rockets, I highly recommend Love and Rockets graphic novels. They come from South Cali. They're all about Chicano life, and just comes from a very feminist, indigenous, like street, everything. Just has a lot about politics in there too. And so got into Love and Rockets while I was in undergrad. And so I just was like, remembering and reminiscing all of that, reminiscing all that. And so, yeah, I went for it. But before that, I had worked with actually Fabu, who was our original poet, our first African-American woman poet laureate of Madison, Wisconsin. And
Shout
she had
out
a
to
red.
Pablo.
Yes, big shouts to Fabu, because I don't think I'd be here talking to y'all if it wasn't for a community member believing in me and saying, you know what, yeah, come with me. We'll read together, we'll write together. I'll school you on some things, and that that helped me want to become more of a poet and go after my MFA. So I think there's that space before you decide to do this like all the time, that is a lot of community. And I love that space of like how we can give and receive our art in that way. And so, yeah, with that, I'll pass for the next person, next question. Let's see what's going on.
Yeah. So you guys are good at like sort of flowing in my questions, but the next question is about culture. So, talk about like, the culture of your parents, your abuelos, and kind of how you weave it into your art.
I'm not shy. I'll go. So I grew up in Iowa, and I call it Caucasian corn country in one poem I have, because I grew up, and I mean that lovely, because I have white family, I have Black family, I have Asian family, but we grew up in a very white culture. It was about 12, I watched a special on the KKK after Saturday morning cartoons, and I'm like, ooh, well, this is a whole nother level for things to me to understand as a 11, 12-year-old. And I think I realized that we do have a different culture amidst all of this whiteness that we were in. And my family, they're second and third generation Mexican American. We came up with the railroads. I had to defend that recently in a bio. I have a piece coming out, and they're like, how can this be? And I'm like, well, this is a little mini history lesson, but I'll give it to you. And this is how someone can be second and third generation, right? And in Newton, Iowa, the families pretty much lived together. So my grandmothers grew up next door to each other. I thought that was normal. It turned out to be super special. So my poems in the third collection are full of these stories where I would go sit on their graves, remember the stories my mother told me as we cleaned them off, and bring those out. And these are folks that died in, back in all the wars that have ever been fought. And actually the cemeteries in Iowa are full of dead Mexicans. You can go back and you can see we were there. We do not show on a census, but we were there. And there's pictures. And as a baby poet, the state of Iowa published a piece, and it had these pictures of these railroad workers. And they look like Latinos, and they're Irish, and they're Black, and they're Asian, but they are also poor whites. So for me, I like to bring the urban and the rural. I flow between the urban and the rural. I'm in Chicago every time I can. Now, we're not allowed there right now because of the pandemic, but my folks live there. My little sister migrated there with her family. So I feel like culture is part of who I am. I am culturally Catholic. I'm culturally Mexican American. I call my house, this is my own. You can use this. It's Mexican French modern, right? So it's like flipping the modern, but to me, I've got my Frida Kahlo. I call this my yellow. I've got my Virgin de Guadalupe. I've got my mothers and my grandmothers, Mocojete. I am so Mexican, and I love that. But I'm also French, and I'm German, and I have this beautiful, I think, family, and we would get together and we would laugh and dance. So no matter what happened, we had this secure family. And I'm going to tell you this, I think this is true, but we're the only Mexicans growing up in Pleasant Hill, Iowa. And if you look at the Poetry Foundation, you can see that poem. But we had this huge tornado, and this tornado hit every house but my parents. And I think it's all the saints my mother had all around the house. Like every single house was hit, not ours. And then I go to Seattle and I find Los Norteños, and I'm going to read with my friend Raul, and Araceli read with him recently. And it's just this beautiful collection of poets coming together across the country. And I joined Los Norteños, and I got introduced to Dios de los Muertos. I keep finding my culture wherever I go in new and unexpected ways. And so to me, it's been, I have to weave it. I mean, I am dark skinned. I, have dark hair. I'm not coloring my hair, as you'll notice, but I am going to embrace all of this. I call myself a chingona, and that's cool. But even in my thesis, I weaved in this culture, and I'm a very political person. When we were children, we marched with Cesar Chavez. When my dad was at the University of Iowa, we helped start the Chicano House. My early memories are of listening to Santana, and my parents are, were activists and were marching for civil rights. So to me, I'm very proud to be a Mexicana, Chicana, and I identify as such. And I think it's in my poetry too. I know it is. And I can write things that you wouldn't know. This was written by someone who's a woman of color. You wouldn't know. I have those poems too. But I also have deep family poems that connect 300 years of social political history and bring it to the page. And that might be one I read today. But to me, those are real powerful. And it's also honoring my ancestors, not just my physical ancestors, but my literary ancestors,
I remember that was I took a class from a visiting scholar. It was, God, why am I blanking on his name? But he ended up coming to Wisconsin to do poetry with us. And he said something about like tracing your lineage and like find your literary family tree as well, like find all the people that influenced you in your poetry as well. Mark Bamuthi Joseph, that's who it is. Yeah. So thank you for that. Maria, do you want to go next? Talk about how Honduras lives and breathes in your work.
Yes. So you can see in the background a picture. It's a black and white picture. Right over here. That's my grandma, Tita Merida. Tita is short for abuelita or grandma. I grew up with her. She lived with us until she was like 93 years old, and on and off. But she was a part of my life, always. And she was like a second mother to me. Very important pillar in our culture, our grandmothers. And they are so important that, at least in my life, I would say half of my work have been inspired by her and my other grandmother. My other grandmother's name was Aurora, which you can't see the image, the pictures, the artwork I've done about her through this camera, but they're on this side. So I have work about both of my grandmothers. In fact, my last two-person show was all about both of them. And yeah, I'm half Honduran and half from Costa Rica. So my mother's from Costa Rica and my dad is from Honduras, but I was born and raised in Honduras. And, even though I've been going back and forth from the United States, I never really thought about my own story as an immigrant. I always just said my story is Honduran. My home is Honduras. And there was always this idea in the back of my head, I'm going back. That's my home country. I'm going back. I'm here temporarily. I'm thinking about how I'm going to take my children back there, my husband back there, and I'm going to make my house back in Honduras or Costa Rica even. But it wasn't until I took my grandmother back, Tita Melida, the one in the picture in the back. She didn't want to die here in the United States. She had lived most of her life in Honduras. She just came in her last year here in the United States because she couldn't be by herself. But she was, getting to that point where she knew she was gonna, sorry, that's my Siri. She wanted to pass away in Honduras. So she said, please take me back. And so I took her back. I flew her to Honduras. And I hadn't been back to Tegucigalpa, which is the capital, and that's where I'm from. I hadn't been back in 10 years. And it was the first time I was back as a mother to Tegucigalpa. And that whole mindset that I had about going back and living there and this is my home and changed. It changed drastically. All of the streets in my neighborhood were gated. It used to be a neighborhood with 2 entrances, and it was safe. You can only come through 2 streets. Everything else was dead ends. But every single dead end street had a gate, and it was not safe. It wasn't, at least my neighborhood, where I was in. A lot of Tegucigalpa is no longer safe. And it wasn't the place I wanted to bring up my kids. I wanted my kids to be able to ride their bikes outside without any problem. And I wanted my kids to go to a park. And I wanted my kids to have access to libraries. And it's not much to ask, but I wanted, I thought differently this time because I'm a mother. And so it was the first time that I started to think about my own story of immigration, because it finally hit me. This is no longer my home. My home is in Wisconsin. It's in Madison. And and so I felt a huge sense of loss. It felt like something died inside of me. And so the rest of my work has been about that. It has been about passage of time. It has been about loss. It has been about stories of immigration, not just mine, but other people's stories of immigration. And how that culture that is so important to us, how that continues to sustain us here in the United States, even though we're not there anymore. And so, yeah, that's a little bit about me. It's interesting because in Honduras, it's not about the color of your skin. It's about your social status. It's about whether you're poor or you're rich. And that's where you get discrimination from. If you're poor or you're rich, they don't see your color, they see your last name. They see the car that you're driving, they see the school that you went to, they see the neighborhood that you live in. That's what it is about over there. And so over there, I grew up in I would say in the middle class, which is very small percentage. You have a very small percentage of middle class, a very small percentage of rich, and then the rest is everybody else lives in poverty. And so I would say, even though I'm here in the United States, I'm Latina, over there, I'm the one living in privilege. And so it's a different take, right? So I was the one who had the house and somebody else was coming to beg for food, right? It was a different point of view. Over there, I'm considered white. And here I'm considered a woman of color. So it's a different thing. And in terms of culture. And those are things I'm navigating now here in the United States to think about things differently. But my work continues to be more about those stories that we share as immigrants.
Thank you for that perspective. Araceli, do you want to add in? I know you've sort of weaved some of this into your conversation, but tell us more.
Well, for the sake of time, I'm going to actually just read you guys my poem, which I think is kind of speaks to identity. And I've been I think it speaks to a lot to identity. So we'll start here with a little Chicana poem for y'all. I love tortillas. I want to unpack my tongue in your ear, my randomness in your mind. Come get lost with me down the road. We'll have a cig, talk politics without saying a word. I want to rest in your pit to the bottom of your eyes, slide to a corner and catch a fly, get behind the sockets, deep in the cerebellum. Each fleeting moment will be mine to treasure so I can forget my own crunchy leg over days of weeks of talking and writing, but nothing to show. What an imposter I've become, real writing without distractions. Why is it that all writers have white hair? It's not like, it's not until the kids are gone, if you've made amends with the state of the world, only then will your words work. And all the work you do to close the gap between being novice and good, to deliver that sweet punch into the gatekeeper of words. That gatekeeper of words, he stands there like the wizard of Lord of the Rings, holding his white staff, and never mind that he is older than shit. Never mind that he doesn't care of all the nights your fingers ache to write, but your tit was busy feeding a baby. No, it was little of concern of his that you didn't know where to put the comma. Well, I guess you're only good for making babies and slapping tortillas. Oh, I love me some tortillas.
All right, let's go. Let's go. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. That was beautiful. Let's talk a little bit about Wisconsin. That's where you all are right now.
Yes.
So how does Wisconsin show up in your art? Anybody can take this.
Well, I'm going to read a poem in response to that. How about we do that?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Because this poem mixes the urban, the rural, and I spent 13 years working for the ACLU, and sometimes that shows up in the work. So there's some of that in here too. This is called Because. The dew spools in the far corner of the pasture. A black and white Holstein dairy cow licks her newborn calf clean, her pink tongue unfolding. Emerald field grass stripes blink. The calf looks over the hill, past barbed wire fences, interstate traffic, rolling green hills and faded white farmhouses across the North Plains, towards the core orb, the heat of the rising sun for the first time. Sobs wrench my body cavity, we're all in captivity. Tears flood my shirt, I pull over. Let me sit in sadness for a spell. I need to write this out. Died in her sleep. Her sister threw herself in front of a truck. Leaves behind 3 daughters. Her father called her Negrita. The other 2 sisters were fair. The mother bathes her calf. Mist rising, love, a pink tongue in the morning, licks its forehead, dew blinks grass, fog lingers around their ankles, a vision called from the herd that crowds the hill. And that's from this book, In Light Always Light, which is kind of a mix of poems, past, present, but definitely poems from Wisconsin.
Awesome. Thank you. Maria, do you want to talk a little bit about your Wisconsinness?
I wanted to share a piece that's very much inspired by Wisconsin. I'm going to share my screen to do that. So let's see. Share screen.
Oh, we should hide this. No.
Can you guys see it?
Not yet.
Okay. let me know when you see it.
I see it.
I'm not sure. Can you see it?
We can see it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, you all have to kind of identify with this, especially right now because it's fall. This one's called Hojas del Otoño. It's an artist book. So I make artist books, and this one, imagine in paper, you, instead of saying a sheet of paper, you can say a leaf of paper. So these are my paper leaves. And these are the book, what you would call a signature within a book. So as you know, books can be made out of signatures. And so my signatures are all loose leaves. And this one is inspired by my first experience of coming to Wisconsin. I had never experienced the seasons, the change of seasons. In Honduras, we only have dry season and rainy season. So when I came to Wisconsin for the first time, I saw the beautiful change of colors in the leaves, and I was mesmerized. It was such an amazing experience that continues to keep me in awe till this day. It's my favorite season till this day. I love going outside and just going on hikes and looking at all of the changes in the leaves. And here you can see the leaves are within a box. And they're on this box. I put danzando en el aire, cayendo lentamente, una hoja celebra su libertad, which means dancing in the wind, falling down slowly, a leaf celebrates freedom. And so this piece is about immigration. It's about the same process that a leaf goes through of coming from this tree and being rooted in this tree and then having to let go of this tree and slowly fall away from that tree is the similar process that I at least went through as an immigrant, of letting go of my roots, letting go of my home. And that process is painful. But in that pain, all of these colors show through, just like in a beautiful fall leaf. And so it's similar in terms of decay. You're letting go of something, you're dying to something that was essential to who you are and to what defined you. And as you can see here in these leaves, the signature, usually signatures can be bound by thread, bookbinding thread, and I used a technique that is very common in our cultures, which is this knotting techniques. You'll see it in hamacas, like hammocks, or you'll see it in shawls. And I decided to do that because my root I wanted to tie kind of something, an aspect about my root into this book. And so I decided to do this kind of style to all of my paper leaves. So yeah, this is one of my pieces that I absolutely love. And it's made out of paper, handmade paper. And it is pigmented. So the way I paint is not with the traditional way of painting with acrylic or oil. I paint with the pulp. So I add pulp and pigments into the pulp itself, and then I paint with that. And that's how these leaves were painted, with the pulp itself. And then I created, while I'm forming the sheet of paper, you can manipulate the wet pulp in many different ways. And I decided to make these holes to kind of resemble something like eating away, to resemble decay. So yes, you can always go to my website, mariamalia.com, and look through my artwork and read more about that artwork and other pieces that I have on there.
And I love the idea about and the beauty that comes through it. This is Naya. She wants to show you her nails. So.
Oh, I love those nails. Oh my goodness.
Got a little body art right here.
Yes, they're all different colors. No, she can
Yes.
draw us her nails all day long. You know that, Joe.
Hanging out with Thea. That's you get to the magic there. Thank you all so much for sharing your art. Again, as somebody who doesn't actively practice art, I really kind of appreciate just being around you all and hearing and seeing it. So the last piece, I was going to ask you all to share some art, and you did. But can you tell us a little bit more about why the connection between art and culture is so important?
I'll keep going first if that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I think it's really important for me when I'm in the community to encourage people to tell their own stories, right? And annually I teach with the ACLU, the Youth Social Justice Poetry, and I develop this poetry workshop around the history of our country and stuff. But I think if we don't tell our own stories, other people will tell it for us. And we need to represent ourselves. And I think everyone has a valuable story. And we are all such interesting human beings. And there's a quote I live by Mary Oliver: "Tell me what it is you will do with your one wild and precious life." And I was telling my husband, I think that might be two of the most important lines in poetry, because I think how we live our life, how we share our life, how we show up matters so much. So I just really want people, wherever they're coming from, right? That's what I want to hear. I want to hear about themselves. And we can all, I think, relate to culture in some way. I have a poem I call Hamburger Gravy for my white grandfather. And that's poverty food. But I can trace my lineage through food more so maybe than language, because I don't know the original language that my people spoke when they lived in the mountains before they came down to the silver mines. The Spanish is a language of the conquerors, and so is English. So I think writing and art is a self-discovery. And I know it might be a little trite, but I really believe if you don't know and love understand yourself, then how can you do that for others? And poetry is a vehicle for doing that. And writing is a way for doing that. And I think about how many times when I sit down on the page to approach the page, I don't know what's going to come out. I don't know what it is until I've written it down. And if I can impart just a little bit of that to someone, that self-discovery, that culture, that like celebration of yourself, to me, that's really important. I want to build people up through art. And everything I do, I think, is somewhat political, but it also comes from a great source of love. And I look at how, we've been maligned in these elections and how we need to counteract that. And we're always rediscovering history. And if this is poetry and art is form of history. So I think back what we are finding out now, even in this own country, through stories, through orals, or oral biographies, and it's really important. We need to leave something for the future, and for people to understand where they came from. And I don't think you can do that unless you really understand your own history and your own culture and how you fit in. And I think poetry for me as a young woman, that was really important for me to figure out who I was through writing.
Awesome. Thank you. Anybody else want to jump in?
I want to jump in just because I would say something exactly very similar to that. I think art, visual art, has more than ever right now a responsibility to tell the truth. And we are completely drowning ourselves. Our culture is drowning in a sea of lies about who we are, how we're labeling each other, how we're categorizing groups of people, how the news that we're getting, just everything is just a sea of lies. We don't even know what's the truth anymore. So I think artists in general, musicians, poets, everybody should be striving to tell the truth. And I think that single story that Angie was talking about is extremely, the single story, the individualized story. It's important that we're not generalizing everybody into a single story. And just because I'm Latina, my story is completely different from all the Latinos in the United States. My voice, right now, when I talk about my artwork, I always have to be very careful about the way I talk about my art and making sure that what I'm saying in my artist statement is not voicing other people's stories and not voicing their truth. And so that's why what I love about visual art is that it leaves things to interpretation. It's not narrowing something down. And so with visual arts, somebody from another part of the world can come to it and connect with it with their own story. And it's this, art has this ability to be a bridge, to be a connector, and to bring things together, to bring communities and people together. And I think that is what's so beautiful about being an artist, and being engaged with it, is this ability of it to bring our community together.
Right on. Yes. Authenticity is key in art. It's the richest art is that really, truly deeply comes from that person's lived experiences. So let's cap it off with letting folks that are watching know where they can find your art. So if you could just kind of list off where your art is located, how people can get it. We'll make sure to post it in the chat as well.
You can buy my book at Finishing Line Press by inserting my name, or I think A Room of One's Own has it, or you can reach out to me on Facebook directly. But I do want to say I'm putting a poetry reading together for tomorrow for Indigenous Poetics. And so I identify as Indigenous as well. And we have two folks from Wisconsin, myself and Kimberly Blazer, the former Wisconsin Poet Laureate, and Joaquin Zwantendejo, poet from Texas. Definitely want to tune in for him, and Santi Frazier, who's the MFA director of the Institute of American Indian Art. So I am around a lot these days, online, not so much in person. And that's where you can find my art, because I have new pieces that I'm going to try and highlight coming up. So, but tomorrow, Wisconsin Book Festival, you could find it listed there.
Right on, Maria.
I'm going to share my screen again so I can show you where you can buy my pieces.
All right.
Okay.
All right, so can you see my screen? Can you guys hear me? All right. I'm gonna see. So you can buy, this is my landing page. When you go to mariamalia.com, you can go to artwork and you can see all of my pieces right there. And you can just click on them and then you can read more about them. If you're interested in shopping, you go to the shop button right here and you can see the artwork that I'm selling at the moment. Right now, I'm only selling one of my collections, and I'm also selling postcards, and my virtual classes are also there available. So if you're interested in artwork, you just go to Shop Now and click on it. And this is the current collection called Memories of Home. It's 50 little houses that are on sale. And you can just browse through them and see if you like some of them. I usually don't like to sell all of my pieces because I like to put my pieces in exhibitions as well. And so when I feel like I'm ready to let go of a collection, then I put it for sale. And this is the collection that I'm ready to let go and let it enter into other people's homes.
Beautiful. Araceli, where can we find your stuff?
Everywhere. No. I just came up with an edited book called From the Very Edge, and it's with somebody I went to with my MFA over at Hamlin University, and it's a collection of a lot of different poets, both in Spanish, English, and French. And we really just launched it honestly this last week, and I just haven't had time to really talk about it because it kind of like coincided with this art series again. Artists really don't have idle hands, do we? We're always like creating and making those connections. I've been my art you can find as my poetry you can find both online and part of various anthologies. You can hit me up on Facebook, on my website, araceliesparza.com. And yeah, I mean, I've just been so excited to curate this series, this art series. It's really helped me get get connected with so many people, like with Maria's work. I cannot believe she makes so much amazing paper. As writers, I would love to make some paper with you and write on that paper, and really take it the whole process. And I say that with a lot of heart because my grandma used to, like, cuando no teníamos like unas sacapuntas, like if we didn't have like a way to take out the, to like a pencil sharpener, right? For whatever reason, that modernization never came to my house. So like I learned to sharpen my own pencil with a knife. And that was like my first thing. And so to me, it's like, yeah, like let's get to the tools of this like paper. And, as writers, it's like, who has the fastest computer, like really, or voice to text or any of those types of things are mediums. So we were interviewing this morning, one of our younger artists. She was like our youngest that we highlighted. She's like 9 years old. And she started this online, kind of like an online series of her own art, her mom just so they could raise funds to buy some quality mediums, some quality pencils and paints and so forth. And so they just such a beautiful, dedication to the arts. And so we were talking about how does art permeate the series and how does it relate to culture and all of that. I mean, that's what it is. It's like you take the ingenuity of being Latino and like being this, first gen, second generation immigrant that you're just like third, fourth, right, as well. And you have that in you, this innovation, this want to like to do more, and you'll find a way through your art to do that more and to be all that more. And we'll find ways with our art to like raise money for whatever we need and so forth. So yeah, I would love to take that journey with you, Amelia, and like make some paper with you, because I already know how to like, whittle a pencil out of out of a really dull pencil. Apparently that's a skill every writer should have, is, so obviously I was like made into being a writer because my grandmother helped me, like, I don't know, sharpen my own pencil. But yeah, no, I mean, joking aside, it's not, art shouldn't be free. It should be at a premium. We need to fund our artists and our, on programs that inspire our youth to continue this. And so definitely through this, everyone that's been involved will, thank you to our sponsors. And because everyone that's involved has definitely, I'm hoping we'll get not only social capital, but some other capital with this and be able to sell your arts as well.
Yes, love it. Love it. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you for sharing your beautiful art with us. Thank you for connecting with your experiences, both here in the U.S. and through the culture of your ancestors. I'm grateful to be in this space. I'm Joe Maldonado. Thank you, Araceli. Thank you, Maria. And thank you, Angie. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you so much. And Araceli, your
Thank
power.
you, Joe. Thank you, Araceli.
Bye.
Bye. Adios.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.